Good morning from Vietnam. Good evening to you, Dr. Gregory. Thanks a lot for spending your evening joining our show again for the second time. And this time we talk about the topic of aging linguism. And thanks for being so kind, so generous to spend your time with us.
I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy to add to your learning about wisdom. And I might actually be able to share some.
Absolutely, you will. And for a culture, in our culture, it's very honored if our audience can have you to do a little introduction about who you are and the works you are doing. Would you please do that for us again, please?
Yeah, I've been at this game for probably 40 years, and 30 of those have been studying wisdom, which means for me, going back to the wisdom teachings through various cultures, the Buddhist culture, the Sufi culture in the Middle East, and my own culture, and trying to understand what people mean by wisdom. And there's spiritual overtones to it, and there's heart-centered overtones to it. In the United States, mostly it's focused on knowledge and intellect. But I found that almost every other culture talks about the experience a person has, what they've learned from the experience, and how they apply that learning. So those three things became the core of the wisdom development process I was working with emerging leaders on. So emerging leaders come in, they don't have a whole lot of leadership experience, but they almost always have some sort of identity, what they have identified as a leader, which is their beliefs, their values, and their attitudes. And the challenge is most of those people have not explored those three things in depth. And that's where the core learning is, especially for inner wisdom. So what beliefs do you have about leadership that you grew up with that you've forgotten, yet still remain in the unconscious? And what values have you decided to have moving forward in your leadership role? And what's your attitude towards leadership? And different generations have different attitudes. Their values may be a little different, but almost all the beliefs are the same. And but people who haven't looked at their beliefs tend to live in an illusion about leadership. You know, they look at other people out there who have a lot of success and figure, oh, okay, well, if they can do it, I can do it. Well, maybe you can and maybe you can't. The question is will you look deep at yourself? So there's two steps to the process. One is self-inquiry, which means you ask questions of yourself to find out what those answers are. Unfortunately, most people do self-inquisition. They beat themselves up when they have a situation that is a setback instead of success. They beat themselves up. Oh, I did something wrong. Da, da, da. No, that's part of the learning process. You know, you need to change your attitude about your learning. And then once you've uncovered some things, the thing is self-reflection. Is this something you want to change? Is this something you want to do something with? And doing that process is where the learning emerges from your experience. Now, the interesting thing is, working with senior leaders, a lot of times they'll have great knowledge about leadership and great experiences about leadership, but they do the experiences over and over again. They don't learn from them. And that limits the amount of wisdom that they can generate. So they become knowledge-led leaders and not wisdom-led leaders. And there's a big difference in that. One of the biggest differences is, do you lead from a place of the highest good of all concerned? And people in my generation, which is a boomer generation, probably had a highest good of all concerned in the 60s, but then we got sucked into the money. And that got out the table, okay? And so we look at things from will I make money, will I make money type of thing. So that's a critical piece to the inner wisdom, is finding out, okay, what's your motivation? And that has a direct impact on wisdom of the heart. Now, the interesting thing is the next generation, the next two generations are very, very automatically focus on heart. Not all of them, but a significant amount of them.
Mm.
They do things just because it has a heart to it, it feels good, and they see how it benefits other people. So there's a lot of leaders that are narcissistic. They only think about me. We have a presidential candidate right now that's very much wired that way.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And, there's been a lot of psychiatric studies of him and that kind of thing published, and they're probably all right. So the question is, are you that kind of leader to extreme, or are you extreme for what I call a loving leader? Now, most people have a hesitation to use the word love in business. And the reason is because for them, love is an emotional experience. And doing loving means you're having emotional flooding. And that's just not really appropriate in a business context. What is appropriate is taking care of yourself, taking care of other people, supporting yourself, supporting other people, and looking at the entire genre of people who are involved and saying, what's the highest good for everybody?
Mm.
And that's my definition of loving leadership, which is very different from what you would do with your wife or your significant other or your kids, which has much more of emotional content. So we want to have leaders exhibit loving, but not get in trouble with human resources.
So in this conversation today, we're going to help leaders and managers to becoming wisdom-led individual instead of experience-led individual, right? So more of the wisdom-led individual becoming ones, okay? So Dr. Gregory, I like to start simple first, okay?
Okay.
We have a lot of different understanding about what wisdom is. And I want to go with the basic one, which is a definition of what wisdom. So if you've been researching on this topic for like decades of your life, right, and help people to get to that direction. So to your own definition, what is wisdom?
Wisdom is, this is a really great question because there's so many different definitions out there. For me, wisdom is practical application of what you've learned from your experience. So that means you take a look at what your experience is and you look at the reality of that experience. What's the honesty of that experience? So that means you really have to look at it from an objective basis. Most of our experiences are subjective in nature. Let me give you a simple example. Let's say a person, you want to define somebody who's driving a car. If they're sitting behind the steering wheel, they have their hands on the steering wheel, their feet on the pedals, and there's nobody else in the car, it's pretty safe to assume that they're the ones driving the car. So that's an objective experience. So now they're driving down the road and another car cuts in front of them. That's where you start having the subjective experiences. You get afraid that you're going to crash and it's going to be a medical charge. You're afraid that this guy's crazy, you need to get him off the road. You have all these little things that come up. You may even take action, call the police department and say there's a crazy man on the road. And give the police the license plate number. So those are all subjective experiences. They're subject to our interpretation of what went on.
Oh.
Okay. What we don't know is the guy was trying to hit a bee that had come in through his window, and he just accidentally turned over to the side. He wasn't even aware that you were behind him. He was so busy trying to get the bee out of the car. So he's having a different objective experience from your subjective experience. So you have to look at your experience and say, is that really an objective experience or is that a subjective experience? Experiences are like onions. You just peel the layers away till you get down to the core. And that's what I call the reality. And that's the process of peeling the layers away is wisdom development. What emerges is the core, and that represents the wisdom, especially if you learn from it.
Beautiful. And we want to get to that core. We want to get to
Yes.
that core. Start learning the process how to peel the layer, and get to that core, because at that core is where we find peace, where we find, like a connection with other people, with making the world a better place for everybody, right? So if we want to change our view and start to have a baby step to peel the layer like that, in order for us to starting to get into the direction to get our core, what
Well,
can I and do now?
the first aspect, the first piece of work that you need to do is deconstruct your beliefs. And since we're talking about leadership, deconstruct your beliefs about leaders and leadership. See, as you're growing up from like about 0 to 7 years old, you're subject to what is called imprinting, which is basically you get programmed.
Mm.
The reason is you don't really have a lot of cognitive development at that point. So everything goes in. So who programs you? Your parents, what they say to you, which is good or bad, your friends' parents, any spiritual organizations you belong to, and your school.
Mm.
Not all programmings are the same. Sometimes one will say one thing and another will say another thing, and so that creates confusion inside.
Mm.
So that's why you want to deconstruct it, because you want to get real clear what the core is for you. So that's part of the wisdom identity, is your beliefs. The next thing is you want to look at what you value.
Mm.
What are your values? What's important to you? What's not important to you? Have you really explicitly taken a look at that? Have you taken a look at your values and decided that it's good, or decided that you want to work on that more? Here's an example. I know two guys who ran similar businesses, and they decided to combine their business in the small town they were in so they could get all the business.
Mm.
One had a values system that was different than the other. So we will keep our most important values at the very top, and anything that's less than that, we'll have a tendency to sacrifice. Well, I knew one person had the value of honesty, honest business dealings at the very top. The other one had making money as the very top. And I knew and I warned them, I said, something's going to happen where one's going to say, hey, we just shade the truth a little bit, we'll make a ton of money. One of you will want to do it, one of you won't want to do it. And that's a values conflict.
Mm.
So, and sure enough, that's what happened. They finally got divorced, their business divorced, and went back to separate businesses. Because one said, you're nuts, we can do this, we make a lot of money. And the guy says, I can't sacrifice my values like that.
Mm.
So that's why you want to take a hard look at your values and ask yourself, am I willing to sacrifice that value? Is there something specific I'm willing to sacrifice that value for?
Mm.
Okay, and that way you get down to your core values.
Mm.
And often the values come from the beliefs that have been programmed into your unconscious, and that's why you start with beliefs first.
So deconstruct.
Yeah, so you may have a value out there that's being driven by these unrealized beliefs, but you realize the belief and you go, wait a minute, I don't want to do that. So you change your value system.
Wow. So let's start with the first one first. So deconstruct our belief. Okay, so
Yes.
we create our belief system. And it's something that we've been having it for so long. It's becoming, a part of our life already, become a part of our identity already. And now deconstructing it, which means that we have to take a deep look at that one and redefine which is right, what to keep and what to eliminate, right? So, but it's not easy process.
No,
Yes.
it's a very simple process, but it's not easy.
Yes. So if I would like to take a look at my upbringings, what had been there with me for so long, and decided to, redefine my belief. How could I do that? How could our audience do that?
Well, you could start with your school system. What did your teachers tell you in school, and what did your teachers say was the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do? Because remember, right and wrong is just a belief, but it's programmed in such an overt way that you believe that it's right and you believe that it's wrong. Question is it right? Is it wrong? And only you can make that decision for yourself. Because if you listen to somebody else, they're putting their value system on. They're putting their subjective values, which generally in psychology is called a projection. They're projecting their values on you. Now, that's an interesting message that psychologists do. And they say, is it a projection or is it real? Then you take a very senior psychologist named Carl Jung, who is a Swiss psychologist, and his comment was, all beliefs are projections.
Oh, beliefs are projections. Wow.
Yeah. And so that's why I say you go to your school system and say, what was programmed in is the right thing to do, the wrong thing to do? Why was it the right thing to do? What was going on behind the scenes of that? Why is it the wrong thing to do? What was going on behind the scenes? So in a sense, you're going through what's called a distillation process. You're burning off everything that's not the core of who you are. And different people grow up in different cultures and have entirely different belief systems about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. You know, Americans are very physical in their interaction with people. But when they go to Europe, which is very much more standoffish, Americans are just looked at as like oafs, dumb oafs, because they're nothing but touchy-feely. You know, and most of the Europeans are not that way. So, you know, I put my arm around the shoulder of a fellow worker, and they look at me like, "What are you doing?" You know. So you even have to get down to the subtle stuff and say, okay, what am I doing? Well, in my country, touching somebody is appropriate, especially if it's not a non-threatening touch or it's a non-invasive touch. You know, because it's a way that we do connection with people. But different cultures are raised differently.
Yeah. So you mentioned, you know, about the word right or wrong in here. So what was right and what was wrong? But sometimes a part of growing up is because we live in, for example, it's like we living with a wrong, you know, belief for a long time. So that wrongness become right to us already.
Yes,
and then
that's true.
it's really hard for us to realize, okay, that is, you know, what we believe having some issue in there, and then we need to shake up again and then to relook at the wrongness to make something out of that, right? So how can we take the baby steps just to realize that is something that the knowledge, the belief
just being aware that you have a belief that's the right thing to do or you have a belief that's the wrong thing to do. So that awareness helps you get to the core. If you don't have an awareness and you just operate as if it's only a right thing or wrong thing to do, you're living in projection. Okay, and that's why you use a process called self-inquiry. You ask yourself questions. What is causing me to believe that it's the right thing to do? And I may remember to a second grade teacher that said, if you do this, you're doing the wrong thing. I'll tell you about an experience I had.
Yes.
Interestingly, in third grade, I was taking French lessons after class, but I really wanted to get very good at flashcards, mathematical cards, you know, where you add or multiply numbers. And my mother would, after school, would train me to the point where it was just an immediate reaction. I got so good at it. And then I was having lunch, and the principal came and sat down next to me and said, Greg, why did you stop taking French lessons? I said, because I wanted to work on my flashcards. Well, my teacher thought that I was lying to the principal. And she didn't ask me about it. She just said, well, somebody told a lie at lunch period. We all know how bad that is, don't we? And everybody's looking around the room, and she goes, and it was you, Greg Stebbins. I was like, what? So, of course, I went home and told my mother, and she just about exploded. Uh, she and the teacher had an interesting conversation.
Mm,
So, that's an example that I found doing this process. I go, oh, okay, I had a belief that her interpretation that I was lying, and that's critical here because I know I wasn't lying. I know I was telling the principal the truth, but
mm,
her interpretation was that I was lying.
mm,
And on top of that, she was deciding to put me in embarrassment.
mm.
Okay, so those were the two things, her belief and was contrary to my reality, but she wanted to project her belief on top of me, and it was just incorrect. So I began to take a look at, okay, what else in my life has been like that? And as I started diving into that, all kinds of self-awareness and things came up where
Wow.
people had projected other stuff onto me that really wasn't mine. But I had agreed to it, I had bought off on it, and it was operating as if it was the truth.
So the awareness is critical and it's important for us to recheck on, the information we receive, the thinking in our head, the decision we are about to make, right? But a lot of us not capable or the capability of having that self-awareness is really, really low. So how can we help them to improve their ability to be more self-aware? And yes,
Practice, practice, practice. There's
practice.
there's a music joke in New York where this person's walking down the street and he asks this police officer, "How do I get to Carnegie Hall?" Which is a great emporium of music. And the cop looks at him and goes, "Practice, practice, practice." So just knowing that you need to take the time to question and then taking the time to question that, even if you only do this 2 minutes a day, the amount of self-awareness that you will create to understand your belief structure will just multiply. And the interesting thing, is as soon as you check out one belief, something else is going to pop up. You go, well, what about that one? What about that one? And you won't have to work that hard because this stuff will just start popping up. It's like your unconscious has been waiting for you to come in and take a look, and now it's like, oh, he's looking. Let's give him lots of feedback here. But if you never take the time, this will be a waste.
You mentioned a very critical one is really a wisdom right there is take time and ask questions, right? And that scares me. You know why? Because not a lot of us taught or learn how to ask good questions.
That's
So
right.
if you put me in the room alone and really quiet and asking questions about things around me, but if I don't have the capacity or the capability of asking the right kind of question, I'm not gonna come up with the answers that gonna help me to steer into the right direction. All right. So for self-awareness and things like that, if we want to ask questions, what kind of questions should we ask ourselves? Greg?
Well, the simplest one is, what do I believe is true? What's
Mm,
causing me to believe that it's true? What experiences have I had that have refined or reinforced that it's true? Where did that perception come from? Because you're an open program from 0 to 7, but you're not a conscious program. You're not knowing that. So some people can't remember when they were younger than 7. But as soon as they start checking out their beliefs, they'll have all kinds of memories will flood to the surface.
to come back.
So yeah, so it's just a process of taking the time to ask questions. Now, where else is a good place to ask questions? Well, for years in sales, it was believed that you just hammer on the client until they agree to the sale. Today, it's asking the client questions until you really understand what benefits they want, and then you look at what you're offering and say, yes, I can do that here, 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 and here. I can't do that here and here, but I think here is worth you making a change. So a lot of the sales training today is, how do you ask questions?
Yeah.
Leadership is similar. How do you ask questions? Instead of just powering in and telling a person they're doing things wrong and doing it publicly in front of other employees, why not take the employee in your office, ask them questions, get an understanding of why they're doing things the way they're doing it. They may have a beautiful idea and just missing one piece that you can supply that changes the whole business. But you'll never find that out unless you ask questions.
Yep, I agree with you. Now let's go to the second piece, which is the values, right? So we change first from the belief system, and then now knowing our values, our core values, right? And this is the question for thousands of years. All right, there has been 1,000 of years of, but it's always the hardest thing is know ourselves. So a lot of us really confusing about the values that we are having. So why over 1,000 of years like that, and our human beings still have an issue with looking inside of us and finding our real values?
So this is where the wisdom of the heart becomes very important.
Please share with
us. In
us.
other words, what makes your heart sing? What is so important to you that your heart just blossoms, and you see everything from that perspective? And that's wisdom of the heart. Now, in the business world, we have 4 major substitutes, things that we chase instead of wisdom of the heart. The biggest one in this world is money. People chase money instead of loving. Second best one is recognition. What do I need to do to get recognized? And you see this, I believe you see this a lot on LinkedIn, where I can show you how to be the master of your universe and da-da-da-da. And my question is, does that make your heart sing? And people go, no, but I can be a success. Does being a success make your heart sing? Well, sort of, So that's how you know it's a substitution. The third one is called self-preservation, where you do things to protect yourself. Most of the time, self-preservation is protection of the ego.
Oh.
So the ego is a child of the mind. So you get into a mental do loop, and you need to do things to protect your thought process, and ultimately you're protecting your belief process. The last one is something I call romantic ideal. This is deathly afraid of by most human resource people.
Okay.
Because you do behaviors that are not correct to do in a business environment, but you do them anyway because you think, well, there's some sort of romantic attraction here. I'm just taking care of that. Well, is that a projection on your part, or did the person really feel that way? And the answer is, you better find out real quick whether it's true, whether it's a core piece of you or not. If it involves something that is part of another person, I would double check that, because your core beingness sits at the heart of you. And that's why I use the term, does it make your heart sing? And people, when they start looking at that, will figure out pretty quickly, you know what? I grew up, I wanted to be a musician. My father wanted me to be a scientist. So here I am, a scientist, and I hate it. So what could you do to bring more music into your life, whether you're actually doing it yourself or just listening to it or watching it? So I was working with a person who thought that they wanted to be one of the richest people in the world. I said, why do you want to do that? She said, because I love traveling. I want to go to the place where rich people go, and I want to hang out with rich people. I want to eat at the best restaurants. I want to do all that. So I looked at her and I said, why don't you be a special travel agent? One that puts together bookings for rich people. So you get to travel with rich people, you get to hang out with them, you get to eat at all the cool places. She thought I was nuts. And she found out how easy it was, And that's what she does today.
Oh,
So she's constantly around. She knows some of the richest people in the world because she's taken them on tours of the world.
wow.
And she's hang out with them. She's on cruises with them. She's on airplanes with them. She always flies first class because that's where the rich people fly. So when she puts together what the cost of the trip is, she always inflates it so all of her stuff is paid for. So she's first class. Does she make a lot of money? She does okay, but she doesn't have to be the richest person in the world to accomplish what made her heart sing.
Beautiful. You see, it's right there. It's wisdom. Because she only can see what she wants in there, and then that viewpoint blocks her from seeing other alternative options available for her to get to that direction easier and quicker and more fulfilling also. So I wrote in here the romantic ideal, and I need you to re-explain it to us in a more practical way for me to understand it, please, because it's really new to me.
Okay, so there's two kinds of jobs in the world that people have a lot of romance attached to it. And that would be ship's captains of a big ship, or airplane pilots. Because it's got to be cool to fly an airplane, so I have some sort of romance about that. And they're the ones that fly to different countries, and everybody on the plane is in their responsibility, and they've got all this stuff going on. So those two things are romantic ideals. So I had a client who had a romantic ideal that was non-sexual. I want to be somebody who people really look up to. Okay, well, that people who really look up to you is recognition. Oh, okay. Huh. I said, where did this come from? And he started talking to me about he was on an airplane flight as a kid when he was about 6 years old. He got called up to the cockpit, and the pilot took off his wings and gave him the wings. That's pretty romantic.
Yeah.
And so he had this idea that I want to be like that. So I said, how can you give people wings but not necessarily be in an airplane? So he really thought about that. And he realized that the people who worked for him and his company needed to be treated like angels. They needed to have their wings. So he moved from some sort of external process to an internal process and said, if I really take care of those people, they will have those wings. I said, how about yourself? Are you taking care of yourself? Oh, no, can't do that. That's narcissistic. I said, are you doing it for other people? He said, yeah. Then I said, it's not narcissistic. If you're doing it for we instead of me, that means you're loving and not narcissistic. So he started taking care of himself. He changed his diet. He changed his exercise routine. He made a lot of changes in life. And the people who worked for him noticed because he had lost 30 pounds, constantly was smiling. Somebody had a question, he would take time to sit and listen to him. He wasn't answering his phone. He wasn't his computer. He would just sit there and stare at them and look at them, saying, you're the most important person in the room. How can I get what you're getting? And people just felt so honored by him that his turnover in his company dropped to zero. Nobody wanted to leave. And he had tons of people applying for a job there. He didn't have jobs for them.
Not enough on the table for everybody, right? We all have limitations. Dr. Gregory, here's a thing that I have been thinking for a long time. Those good leaders, put it that way, good leader, all right? They put into those roles because they're really good at performing. So they say that experience-led leaders, right? And because of that, they get the business result, they get the team going to the direction that the organization wants and stuff like that. So they kept getting promoted. And along the way, something will be scattered from the inner side. Let's just say the inner wisdom they could not deal with that one. All right. So, and they keep letting their life, leading their life with the experience led, but not the wisdom led. So, if we move them from experience led to wisdom led, it's a huge, a big autopsy right there, and it's scary. It's scary for us to really put our mask out and then really truly see ourselves from within. And so, how can we be more confident and be more accepting to start to take the mask off and look at us from the inside up?
Well, the critical thing is what we've been discussing, and that's self-awareness. The more aware you are, the more confidence and competence you will have. And you will be honest about being out of your competence. I've been asked to come in and work with a couple of people, and I just said, look, what you're looking for is not what I do. And I just turned them down. They said, how can you possibly turn them? We're going to pay you a lot of money. I said, money is not my primary motivator. So that's not going to work either. So basically I said, your business does not make my heart sing. I may have the skills that you think I have. I may have the experience that makes sense here, but there's so many other things going on in your business that you need to clean up first, or there won't be any change taking place. So if you clean up your beliefs, clean up your values, clean up your attitudes, all three of those things will shape your behavior. So you're behaving a certain way, but you haven't figured out what's causing that behavior inside. So ask your question again, because I haven't quite answered it yet.
No, my question is, I think that you partly touch into that one is to go back into the awareness, right? And then really look at us from the be more confident and in taking off the mask. That's what I want. But I want to go deeper on that one. If because I saw a lot of great leaders, great business leader. By the time they retire, not just in my country, but in every country that I had a chance to come and met these people, they didn't have a good life after they retire, because where all the recognition gone, where all the fame and all the money gone, so they becoming just a human being, just like me, just like somebody else out there, right? The power is gone, nothing. And I looked at them and I saw it's very weak people, not like used to be strong in suit and then be a CEO, CFO, talk to other people, to the team. So if we can help them to change now, they don't need to be using those recognition, those power as a tool to to enjoy life in a different way. That's what I want.
Yeah, they had never taken a look at what was causing them to do what they were doing. They never developed the self-awareness, get down to the core. Let me give you an example of a friend of mine who's gotten down to the core. In the early 1970s, he was working for a company and he started exhibiting behavior, and his boss came down to him and said, you better cut that behavior out or you're going to be sitting on a hillside knitting for a living. And my friend had just a tremendous amount of self-awareness and confidence. So he looked at his boss and said, I sat on a hillside knitting for a living in the late 60s. It was kind of fun. So needless to say, he was let go shortly thereafter because he wasn't willing to play the game. And I asked him about that, and he said, I'm willing to play the game that makes my heart sing. I'm not willing to play the game where I have to put on a false mask every day and parade around as if I'm part of the crew. So eventually, he got into the consulting business similar to mine, and he's had great success at it. But he knows who he is inside, and so when he shows up as who he is inside, people just love working with him.
Yeah.
Because here's an authentic, real person.
Yeah. True.
Yeah. So That's the thing. Can you get back to your authenticity? There's a author, Harvard business professor, who talks about authentic leadership, Bill George.
Yeah.
His books, I really like reading his books because he really gets down to what the core of a person is and gives suggestions on how to get down to the core. Similar to what I'm telling you. But the critical thing is, who are you inside? And it may not be who you are exhibiting right now, but how can you work backwards to get to that, to understand that, and then learn to honor that? Because as soon as you honor it, you will start being that. Your behaviors will change. People recognize the changed behavior. Most people want to hang out with you. Some people who are married to the old behavior won't want to deal with you again.
So everything boiling back to the thing that you say, what makes your heart sings, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So here's the thing. The question next is about values, because there's so many different values in the world. Each country have different set of values, and then if we grow up in that culture, we will have our own definition, our own dictionary of values. All right, and maybe this value my heart will sing a little bit, and that value my heart will sing loud and joyful and stuff like that. And we cannot have so many values in our lives to follow, otherwise it becoming too much and it's confusing also. So how can we find and make sure those a set of values is really make our heart sing happily, joyfully, and loudly?
Well, for me, and this is only for me, culturally, the more we get back to our spiritual roots, the more we'll get into things that make our heart sing. But even that has different cultural perspectives. What makes the heart sing of a Buddhist is going to be very different than a Christian. Might be very different than a Sufi or a Muslim. But you have to get back to what you grew up with, what's at your core. And eventually, as you get back into that, you'll realize that there's a lot of projection that goes on in spiritual stuff as well as just being out in the world. But as you get back to the core of each one, you'll find out that there's very little difference at the core of one person from another. In the spiritual world, that's called oneness.
Oneness.
Yeah, where we're all the same, but we may not be behaving the same. There's another piece that you have to look at it, and this is tough for most Christian people, is what's the evolution path that the person that you're working with? What previous lifetime karma do they have that they're working out? And you get into the Eastern religions, that's an easy one to digest. You get into a Christian, that's not so easy to digest, even though it's presented in a lot of the teachings. So, what's your level of evolution? Where are you on the evolvement path, and what is the core of that evolvement path? So some people are fairly new and don't know if there's a right or wrong. Some people are very experienced and realize it doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. All that matters is, are you operating from your core? So
I note in here very beautiful thing that you keep saying, to me and only to me. All right? And that's very wise. So I want to bring you through your lifetime. Since when you developed that capacity to, when you share your idea, you know it just only to in your own idea and only to your idea?
I really started learning that when I was about 16 years old.
16 years old. That's very early to realize that lesson. Okay.
Yeah, you could say I've been on this path for about 50 some odd years.
Teach us the occasion at 16 years old.
Well, I have to blame it on my mom. My mom, there was a very prominent psychic in the early 60s. Her name was, just jumped out of my head. I'll get it in a second. But she wrote a lot of books. And my mom started buying me these books when I was 16. My mom was very attuned to all this. And I call her psychic, and I refer to her as Swami Mommy, because my brother and I couldn't get into trouble. She would know. How she knew, I don't know. Even when I moved from the East Coast to the West Coast, I would sometimes get a call from her going, okay, what's going on? Nothing, Mom, everything's good. Don't lie to me. Tell me what's going on. So she guided me through, and then I started doing investigation on various spiritual groups, and I've been working with one spiritual group for about 40 plus years. So I learned to meditate when I was about 17, 18 years old, and then I had some real formal training when I turned 19. And I do about 2 hours of meditation a day, usually from 4 or 6 in the morning to 6 or 8. So, and that's just a habit pattern now. I feel uncomfortable if I don't get up and sit in my chair to do my meditation. So that's what's trained me to look more deeply into myself about what is true for me, what is not true for me. It's also trained me to recognize somebody else's projection on top of me. Because when I was early, very early on in my teens and 20s and 30s, I would still buy off on projections. And then I stopped doing that when I turned about 34. I said, I'm not going to be doing that anymore. So people would still try to project on me, and I would just, as nicely as I could, lay out their projection in front of them, and they did what they did with it. Mostly people were upset that I called them on it.
Wow.
Because they had been using projections like that to have control over other people, but they realized they couldn't control me, and they weren't happy about that. So, and to make it even worse, I was very neutral about it. So yeah, you can project on me, just don't expect me to act on it.
So what happened at age 34 that Greg say that enough is enough, no more projection from other people to my life?
I started my consulting endeavors with a different company with a couple of friends of mine, and both of them were very skilled at the kind of thing I've been talking to you about, which is self-awareness, self-development. But even they had various projections they did, and then as I looked at their projections, I go, okay, if you see that it means something inside of you is doing that as well. Because if you see it in another person, it's, the only way you would see it is if you're doing it. So it forced me to start looking more deeply into, okay, where am I projecting? What am I doing? And that was a big leap for me. See what other people are doing and saying, okay, it's like the reason I'm not a U-boat commander is because I don't look at people as U-boat commanders. The reason I project something is because that's something inside of me. So what is it inside of me that's projecting? What am I hoping to accomplish by doing that projection? So I could see what they were doing, I could see what they were wanting to accomplish, but the only way I would notice that is if there was a piece of me that was also doing that. So that became the new piece that I look at. Go ahead.
So I feel sad for the people who didn't have different choice. Sometimes we go to work for a company and follow a leader who kept put projections on our life, our work, but we don't have, some people out there don't have the capacity to look for jobs elsewhere because so many other limitations and stuff. So they keep on to that point for so long. So if there's a piece of advice that you could give it to our audience to say, okay, if you try to do certain things so that can help them to be more competent to to be able to resist those projections in the life.
Well, I would challenge you to I'm using the word resist.
Resist.
Maybe you don't resist. Maybe you decide what you want to do instead and you go do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you have the confidence and do you have the competence to do something different? Let me get an example, and this is an example of loving leadership. So with a CEO who was changing his business, and all the rest of his executive team, except one person, the CFO, was totally in alignment with him, saying, yeah, we got to go do that. The CFO said, are you nuts? You're going to go out of business, and was unconsciously against the big change. I said, well, you could change out your CFO. And he looked at me and he said, he's been a lifelong friend. I can't do that to him. I said, well, then maybe you need to find him another job. He looked at me and he said, I've never thought of that. So finding him another job that was in alignment with his values became one of his core pieces. And he found another job for the guy and told the owner of that company, look, you need to hire my CFO. He does marvelous things. You run a business the way he wants businesses run. It's a perfect marriage. The guy goes, well, what are you going to do? So I'm going to go find a CFO that's in alignment with where we're going. So the change was made. He found a new CFO that was totally in alignment with where he was going. His business took off because the block was not there. The guy the CFO went to fell in love with the guy and said, I understand why he's your close friend. He's good. He's fantastic. And their friendship still is intact. So out of his loving, he took care of his friend, even though it meant he had to go find another company for the guy to work with so he could get a CFO that was in alignment with where he wanted to go. And it worked out perfectly for him.
Beautiful.
So that's, you have the confidence to make that kind of change, you have the competence to make that change. So he didn't think he had the confidence to make the change, and he thought he'd ruin his friendship. But the way he had it suggested for him to make the change, he did, and he did it within 3 months. It was amazing.
Wow. So the more I talk to you, the more I see so many opportunities, so many things I couldn't even envision. That's
wisdom. Is you learn how to make your way around all that.
Yeah. So which make me coming up with the last few questions. Okay.
Okay.
So my wife and I, we've been on a quest to help people to improve their ability to think, because we believe that if we can change our ability to think, then we can start come up with better idea, and that better idea will become something that we can, take us to a different territory in our life, right? And there's so many noises out there that alter our think, that affected our thinking, makes our thinking is being diminishing. So every chance I got to talk to an expert, I would love to ask this question, and especially for you, I would love to ask this question even more. Okay, so how have you been improved your own ability to think and expanding it?
So the process, the wisdom development process I laid out, inquiry and self-reflection. Your ability to think is a part of your self-reflection, and it also involves intuitive insight. So you need to go to a whole other process called contemplation. That's where you just take something that's concerning you and you just look at it. And you learn to let that speak to you. So you're not, because as soon as you start trying to think, you'll overanalyze. And that's where most people get in trouble with their thinking process. They overanalyze. They analyze beyond what they need to, and they start adding things to it till what starts as a small problem becomes a huge problem because they see all the aspects of it. Well, that's a waste of time. Why not just contemplate on that and let that speak to you, and then say, do I have the confidence, do I have the competence to implement that thought? And the answer usually is yes, because the process of contemplation is part of you coming out and reflecting back to yourself. So contemplation generates intuitive insight, which is a higher level of thinking, Most thinking is overanalyzed. So you think you're thinking, but you're not. You're just analyzing.
Oh. So how can we let the intuitive thinking to help us to accelerate in our life?
Well, it's counterintuitive. The process is quieting your mind.
Quieting our mind.
Yeah, you quiet your mind and let those natural processes take place. After a while, you'll begin to realize what those natural processes are, and you'll start doing it that way. Most people enter the thinking process doing analysis, and they end up doing what's called paralysis of analysis. They do so much analysis that they become paralyzed and don't risk. The second part about it is when you have a clear thought like that, take a small risk, see if it works. If it doesn't work, it's okay because you were just taking a small risk. Most people have an idea, well, if I get that kind of idea, I'm going to bet the farm. And then there's a bet everything. No, that's not intelligence. That's not part of your natural intelligence.
Beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. So yes.
So in reflection, you're doing a meditative process. You're allowing that, then you move to contemplation, which is another meditative process, but is a quieting process. Reflection is you're focused on one thing and letting that reflect back to you. Contemplation is you're looking at the whole and saying, what is the whole reflecting to me?
Wow.
And that's where the intuitive insight comes from.
Beautiful.
A lot of leaders are afraid of intuition.
Why is that?
I don't know, because intuition has always been a big part of my life. And in my family, especially working with my mother, she said, listen to your intuition. It doesn't mean you have to do everything your intuition says. Just listen to it. See what it says. And so here's where the wisdom of the heart comes in. If you have an intuitive hit, you have that intuitive insight, and your heart starts to sing, then that's the thing you take advantage of. You move on that.
Wow. Beautiful. So many insight in this conversation today. I'd like to go to the last question to conclude our conversation. All right. And about the future, I would love to take you to the future to see any wisdom awaiting on the horizon. So is there anything exciting you are working on you want to share with me and our audience so that we can celebrate with Dr. Greg in advance?
Well, I sent you that diagram with
Yes.
the four wisdoms of leadership. And what I'm doing is I'm focusing on emerging leaders, people who are just coming into leadership, and working with them to develop their leadership, develop their wisdom in the beginning. Because most of their training is skills and knowledge. And that's only going to get them so far.
Get into the skill, knowledge, and led, but not the wisdom led.
Yeah, right. So you got to look at the four wisdoms, and especially the new generational leaders, understanding what makes their heart sing is critical.
I believe so too. Yep. And thanks a lot for doing that, Dr. Greg, because you are helping the emerging leaders to become great leaders, and on that path of becoming great leaders themselves, then they will help the employees, the managers, the people that they let, have a fulfilling job. And then those fulfilling job, happy workers going home, they talk at the dining table, they share about the works they are doing, that build hope for the next generations about the future of work. So that's beautiful. I think that the works that you guys are doing is fantastic, and I applaud you for doing that. I admire to all of you.
Well, if I can pay you a compliment, what you and Vivian are doing is contributing greatly to that.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. You have a wonderful evening, and I look forward to our conversation next in the new topic that maybe along the way you can think of, and then I can think of. Then we have a chance again. Okay.
Okay. Great,
Okay,
fantastic.
Dr. Great. Thank you very much. Have a
Thank
good
you.
night there. Bye
Yeah,
bye.
thank you. That was a great conversation. I loved it,
It
every minute.
is. It is.